So welcome everyone. This is our now third or fourth virtual PD. They've been a lot of fun, and so thanks for joining us and being a part of it today. We're super lucky to have our incoming president, Mary Pittman, doing our professional development today, and we're excited about that, and we'll do a more thorough introduction of her in a second. But for right now, we'd just like to start by seeing who's here and asking you what grade bands are you primarily working with? So I think we have a poll that's going to come up. And if you want to just answer on that, we'll get a sense of who's here. And
I'm trying to locate the poll.
got it.
Okay, perfect. Too many screens open.
All right, so I think we're gonna, you guys should be able to see the poll results. So it looks like half of us are awesome pre-K through 5 teachers, and the other half are all you people who seem to understand how to teach the older kids and older people, so good on you. We can go to the next slide, I think. We're trying something a little different this time. If you're joining us for not the first time, you know that we also like to ask where you're joining us from. So normally we've just had you put that in the chat, but instead we're going to try something a little different. And so hopefully with technology working the way that it does, this will work. But what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to share your location on a Padlet, which if you've used it before, you're probably familiar. If not, it's sort of a cool virtual whiteboard sort of brainstorming tool. So I just shared a link. If you all could click that link and go down, if you want to put that up on the shared screen, you're just going to click the little pink plus button and just put in your location to share with us where everybody's joining us from. So you don't have to put your home address, but so for example, just put your city or town or just even state that you're joining, and it'll drop a little pin and we can get a sense of where everybody's joining us from. And you should be able to see that happening in real time also, which is pretty cool. And so while we look at that, this is a tool that some of us have been using in virtual learning and stuff like that. There's not just this map thing. They have about 12 different Padlets, so everything from sort of just sticky notes on a board to timelines. It's not a paid presentation, it's just something that some of us have used, and it's pretty cool. So it seems like we have a lot of people, unsurprisingly, joining us from Colorado. Pretty awesome. If you zoom out a little further, maybe we'll see people a little further afield. Very cool. So nice to see all of you here. And I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Felicia, I believe.
Hello, good afternoon. I love learning about new features that we can use in our classrooms. It's always a great tool to have in your toolbox. So on our agenda this evening, you can see it up there. We're going to hear from Dr. Mary Pittman here about considerations for addressing some unfinished learning. We'll take a short commercial CCTM commercial break. And here's, if you have questions and questions, we'll do that with Mary. And we also have a giveaway before we move on to our final closing things. As far as the norms for this afternoon, evening, whichever you're thinking, Of course, we all are very familiar with Zoom and talking remotely, and so keep yourself muted as you need to. You can turn off your video just to help with bandwidth if that helps. Hopefully everybody's got their name changed. Gildan, can you please go to the next slide? Then they can see the norms that I'm referring to. We have the chat box. You can practice raising your hand. Hopefully we're all pretty good at that. Mary did ask that if you message her directly, she may not see that. She is soloing presenting, so the CCTM members are here in the background to, CCTM board members are here to help answer chat and such. So if you have any questions about those norms, otherwise I'll get right to introducing Mary so that we can move on with our presentation. Dr. Mary Pittman, as I like to refer to her as. She's been in education for more than 20 years. She has her PhD. She's been the director of Boulder Valley. I met her as a content specialist when she was working with CDE. And I was thinking about this yesterday. It's been more than 8 years ago that she helped open my mind up to conceptual mathematics in high school because I didn't understand. I just did the formula. So I'm very grateful for her for helping me out with those skills that I didn't know that I was missing as a teacher. And of course, this slide is not big enough for all of her accomplishments and work that she's been doing. And currently, Dr. Mary Pittman is the director of TNTP for the New Teacher Project. So Mary, I'm going to turn that over to you, and we will continue with our learning.
Helps if you go off mute. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Felicia, for such a nice introduction. I'm excited to get to share some ideas with you. There are no answers, just so you know. I wish that I had answers, but sometimes it's all about the discussion that we can come to together. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is just sort of find out more about how the last few months have been going for all of you. So we're going to try a Padlet again, but this time the Padlet will be a one that you type in. So in your chat box, you will see a link to a different Padlet. I want us to think about what has made you proudest of you or your district's response or your school's response during the COVID-19 pandemic, and what's kind of keeping you up at night? What are the things that are making you most worried at this point? So I'm going to jump over to the Padlet so we can watch as that is being populated by all of you. As you finish typing, go ahead and look at all the amazing things. This is, I've done this presentation just twice, and I do love this question because it just shows what I think the whole world is learning about teachers, which is we figure out how to get it done. And so it's such a fantastic thing to see all this. And then there are just the worries, the stuff that it's keeping us up, those relationships and best practices about being online and making sure this is equitable and just all of those different things that frankly keep me up at night as well. Just going to give you a couple more seconds here to finish filling in, and then we're going to dive in and talk about some of this. I'm actually going to focus in on this one right here. Fear that some will want to reteach everything from the previous grade level and focus on gaps rather than moving us forward. If I could imagine a more perfect, I don't think I could imagine a more perfect way to sort of frame my talk with all of you tonight. So what does that mean? So I want to talk about acceleration rather than remediation, a way of framing how do we sort of restart school next year and really address learning losses while keeping in mind that we don't want to create more inequities that we know are already starting to occur. I want to give you a little bit of background. For those of you who have never heard of TNTP, I jokingly, someone referred to it, it's just like KFC. They don't say Kentucky Fried Chicken anymore, they just go by their acronym. TNTP is similar. We don't go by the New Teacher Project as much anymore because we do so much more than the new teacher, just new teacher work. Our mission really is about addressing educational inequality and supporting teachers. And so we do that through policies and practices, and really just my love and my passion is getting to work with teachers every day. One of the most recent things we've worked on is the opportunity myth, and we're going to actually talk a little bit about some of that research just because I think it supports some of what we need to do and be thinking about for next year. And then lastly, and I'll come back to this, most of what I'm going to talk about today is coming from a more recent document that we just put out, which is the Learning Acceleration Guide, and really thinking about how do we accelerate rather than remediate. So I have two objectives. I had three and then realized there was no way that I was going to keep this to 45 minutes. So I cut the third, which was just we went from why to how to sort of like what would the plan look like. We're good. I believe that why and how are the right places for us to focus. So why should we accelerate learning, and how can we accelerate learning? So I can see the Padlet popping up behind me, and I'm loving all the different things I'm seeing pop up behind me. And I think it just goes along with what this slide sort of frames for us, which is that there are so many challenges that we are going to be experiencing. Social and emotional needs, parents are working from home. It is a lot tougher. I mean, it was tough to communicate with all of our stakeholders before. It's gotten tougher. I personally am massively stressed about budget cuts and then staff vacancies that go along with it. I think we're seeing people think, I'm not sure that I want to stay in teaching right now. And the health and safety that's going to need to be thought of is when we start the school year, and just the idea of social distancing kindergartners, putting them in circles on playgrounds just boggles my mind, and to the point where I'm not sure that I can always think it through. This is what we're not going to talk about tonight. I am not going to try and cover that tonight because what I want to focus on is the academic loss. So what does that mean, and why do we want to accelerate learning? Let's try a Zoom poll. So I'm curious what we think the estimated learning loss will be for next year. So there's a study that recently came out. If you already know the answer, no fair cheating. But what do you think the estimated learning loss will be going into the 2021 school year? I think we have some very good predictors in this group. Almost got everybody. I'm just going to give you just a minute, a couple seconds more. Okay, let's share those results. So this group is thinking somewhere in that 26 to 50%. A recent study put out by NWA agrees. We're talking about 50% learning loss in math. It's closer to 30% in reading. They think that there's a couple reasons for that. Part of it is that kids have been able to do more reading at home, and that math has been a lot harder, as many of us have noticed in all of the memes that keep showing up on Facebook that make me want to sort of cry occasionally, because I just know that we're reinforcing some of these beliefs that some people are good at math and some people are not, that we're all constantly combating as math teachers. So it has been a lot tougher in these last few months of really continuing the math growth for kids. And that is what we're seeing in the data, is that there's a pretty big belief here that we're going to have as much as 50% loss over the summertime. So I can tell you my moment when I see that is, oh my gosh, there's so much now I had to teach from last year. Like this is even worse than any other year. And I want to own that that's the frame that we have in our mind. And then I want to try and combat how we might handle that. One way to think about this a little bit is just some of the lessons we've learned. Certainly, I don't believe that what happened in Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans is exactly the same as what happened here in COVID. But there were some things that we learned that I think is really important. One was that math was the place where the greatest learning loss occurred. It took a few years to sort of get back from that, but part of that was this third bullet here, which is there was a lot of focus on skill recovery, and that didn't yield results. There was a lot of difficulty because it was sort of like, that's what they're missing. I always joke that it's the easiest thing to test is the thing that is also the hardest. Let me rephrase that. The easiest to test is skills, and so we tend to intervene on it. But what we really want to be intervening on are those deeper conceptual kinds of ideas, and those are much harder to assess, and they're much harder to necessarily intervene with. So that fourth bullet is where I sort of want to keep my focus on, which is how do we teach that grade level content in order to, and by doing that, we address the critical prerequisite content from that prior year, not just all of that content from the prior year. All right, so thinking about this. Karen asked who did this study. So this one is CRPE that did the study around the post-Katrina New Orleans schools. So similarly though, TNTP has done in our opportunity myth, similar types of research, which is that we found grade level assignments, sticking at grade level assignments. And even if students were several years behind, by making sure that we engage with grade level assignments, we actually close the gap more than almost anything else. So the first graph up here on the top shows assignments, instruction, engagement, expectations for students who are close to on grade level. So having high expectations, for instance, is the most meaningful for those students. But assignments still, making sure that they have grade level assignments can still mean as much as another extra 1.7 months of growth. When we drop to this bottom figure, which in this case, more and more of our students will actually be in this category because more and more of our students, if we go back to that 50% learning loss, are going to be behind where we would normally want them to be. What we found was that students who were starting the year behind grade level, assignments made all the more difference. We want to stick with those grade level appropriate assignments because we get as much as 7.3 months of learning growth from that. So if I was going to sum this up, the overriding priority is we have to accelerate students to grade level content. We want to have kids in grade level content as quickly as we can, immediately, and be thinking about how do we support and scaffold them to do that work. But grade level content is our focus. And that's our why. That's our mission. That's our reason for being kind of thing. So how do we do it? I will say that this is what I used to do. Like, I'm just going to own that straight up. When you look at this sort of bar at the top, it has traditional remediation, and this is a fourth grade classroom, let's imagine, and I would start with probably close to 3 to 4 months of remediation. So I'd give them an assessment at the start of the year. My students would do well on the assessment. So I would say, gosh, I need to spend time on W and X and Y and Z, because these are all things that were missing from my students, in my mind at least, missing from their knowledge. And I really believe that this was going to help them do better on 4A. So by December, we could get to what we really needed to get to in fourth grade. This isn't working. This hasn't worked. We've all heard the quote about the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results. This is not getting us results. So I'm not saying something that is necessarily groundbreaking. Many of you are way ahead of me on this. I will say that it took me a while to figure out that this is what I needed to be doing, which is I'm going to start fourth grade with fourth grade work. And then as we move through the year, I'm intentionally, just in time, addressing those things that will ensure my students are able to address fourth can do fourth grade work as we are moving through. So there may be something from that unit in third grade. Notice it's a much smaller little flag here of 3W that allows us to get into what students need for 4B. So I'm going to do maybe a mini lesson, maybe a pre-teach. I might do some assessment right here before my 4B. I'm not starting the school year with some big assessment. There's lots of reasons to not start the school year with some big assessment. I'm sure you guys can give me lots of great ideas about why not to do that in the chat. For me, I think the biggest thing that someone said to me once was, you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very base level, we need food and shelter, but just one step up is belonging. And what I realized I was doing with my students was I was assessing them to tell them they didn't belong. So I would give them this assessment right as they walked in the door, and it basically was to sort and select them and tell them, some of you have this and some of you don't. Which isn't to say, frankly, if I gave that same assessment to a group of adults, the majority of adults, frankly, if you didn't teach math, probably would not be successful on it, because we hadn't set up any of our structures in our classroom. We hadn't begun that process of learning and really helping students remember what they do know and ensuring that kids would have access to those things. So now, instead, if we're assessing just before the unit that we need it, there's a much higher grade likelihood that students will have access to those ideas and be able to remember what they did learn in previous years. Another note here is you might see 3X, for instance, down here. This may be something that, frankly, is not going to help them with fourth grade materials. So it's not something that I want to spend an entire month reviewing back through. So it's also thinking through what are those things that are critical for that grade level versus those things that are less important for that grade level. How do I figure that out? Like that's, I mean, like, to me, that would be the first question I'd be asking for all of you sitting out there thinking, okay, that's great, Mary. And how do I do that? My favorite tool it's the place I probably spend most of my time when I'm working with teachers as we're planning is the coherence map from Student Achievement Partners. I highly, highly recommend it. Karen, I will give access to this presentation. I think someone from the CCTM board will jump in and tell you how we'll do that. So yeah, I think about what are those things, so like here, if we go back to our fourth grade example, what are the things that I'm going to need to make sure that students can access this fourth grade standard? And that's where I'm going to go back and look to see what's happening within those clusters and those standards to see which things I need to grab and, for instance, which things I may not need. So my sort of like step my way through this is determining which content I have to address in a coherent way, like thinking across my grade level. If you have high quality curriculum, this is really done for you. You know what your grade level should be looking like. If you're still working in your school district to sort of put together and like purchase the right or have that high quality curriculum, then sometimes this is, again, the work that you need to start with. Really looking at that prior grade to know what kind of engagement I would need. Adapting, which to me I think about what do I need to emphasize, combined or limit that I need to spend time on so that I can provide time on the content that is most pivotal to create independent learners. I usually joke that in education we need the ACP, which is the acronym Control Police. So my last line here is my moment of where I ran out of room and I used all my acronyms. So I just want to make a huge plug. I said that I wasn't going to spend as much time on all of the other things that need to be done besides the content in this session. But you don't get the content without relationships. And so I just want to make sort of a plug here around the idea that social and emotional development for students is critical, as we all know, as our kids are coming in. I talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how important belonging really is. The SMPs, those standards for mathematical practice, are such a powerful way at the beginning of a school year, taking the time to really make sure that across the school year, you're consistently thinking about how those standards for math practice are really developing that culture in your classroom and getting to those deep understandings of mathematics with your students by creating that kind of culture is going to be more important than ever than anything we can probably do in our classrooms. Just a quick sort of note on thinking about diagnosing. So I talked a little bit about not starting the school year with the diagnosing. It is critical that we know we have information about our students, but I would encourage you to think differently about how you get that information and how you use that information. We've spent a lot of time in education diagnosing, as I said, to certain select kids, rather than diagnosing in order to move kids, taking kids where they are and really making sure that they're able to access that grade level content. So I push you to think about, what do you need to diagnose for? So what is the content that's pivotal for deep conceptual understanding in your grade level? I encourage you when possible, I use EdReports here as just a placeholder. I don't want to necessarily advertise one particular curriculum. I think there's lots of great curriculums. I actually think we've had a great emergence of curriculum lately that has really, curriculum materials that have really done some amazing things and are really thinking about some of these ideas right now themselves about how to give those just-in-time diagnostics and just-in-time learning based on the end of the school year last year, not kids not having everything that they would have normally have gotten. So when possible, really looking to that curriculum and looking to see what needs to be taught, what's the necessary needs to access the unit that's coming up, rather than those big assessments that necessarily we have tended to start a school year with as a way of diagnosing. There might be other purposes for those larger scale assessments, and that's a whole nother talk, I'm sure. But in terms of diagnosing, you really want information very directly tied to what is it that students need to understand in order to be able to access that unit. And then just really thinking about, how do we do that just in time rather than those large scale moments at the beginning of the year that will probably change. As students get into things, they remember and grow in so many ways. As we think about those moments where you see those ahas on your students' faces and they're like, oh, we did learn that last year. I still remember my students saying to me, oh, that's just the dinosaur problem. And I finally had to figure out what the dinosaur problem was, because it was a prior year where the context was the thing that they could use. I couldn't talk to them and explain to them that we were doing scale factor, but if I said dinosaur, suddenly they accessed all that part of their brain. And so really thinking about, how do we make sure that kids have the metacognition they need to access those parts of the brain. I'll pause here for just a second. I was reading through my email over the last few weeks, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I have a hard time keeping up sometimes. And I had such a fabulous, happy moment. Raymond is on this call right now, and I was reading through his email just recently about ideas he's been pondering around. And frankly, he probably could have given this talk better than me. Raymond is our CDE math specialist. But I wanted to pull one quote out in particular that I thought just really, in so many ways, are the things that I've been mulling on and thinking through. So he said, his favorite moment of the day basically was reading over a comment on a blog post on Achieve the Core. And so, sorry, I could just hear my doorbell ring. As we all know, when we work from home now, there's always an extra distraction, right? So what the comment said was that we all fret over the gaps. But the real problem is the pile. It's all the previous effort to teach the content, but it was the ways or the words, the tricks or the steps. I love that book, Nix the Tricks. I love the, rules that expire, all of those things, because that's the clutter that we create for students that isn't the mathematics. Students try really hard to hear us and follow all of that, but it doesn't make sense. It changes from year to year. So we say things like, you can't subtract 1 minus 3, and it's not true, you can. You just haven't learned the technique yet. And so we create that clutter for students, and getting students on track isn't about filling the hole then, but it's about designing those productive learning experiences to get through the mountains of clutter we create. And I say this because I loved this because it was sort of this moment of like clarity of, it's not so much that what we have to do next year feels a lot different. There's more students that didn't get access at the end of the year to certain things that we would have loved for them to have had access to and really learning. But I really had this moment of, we always have this. We always have students coming in that we feel like didn't learn something, when in reality, if they might have learned it, but they are still trying to think through the ways that we've taught it to them, that didn't necessarily create independent learners, that didn't set them up to be able to use their learning to continue learning. And what do I mean by that? So let's do an example. This is my first time trying this particular example, so we'll see how it goes. So my question is, how might a typical second grade classroom be taught to solve this problem? So just take a moment, jot down some thoughts in your head. Imagine you were, and I mean a typical, and I'm going to actually say the word traditional. How might a traditional second grade classroom be taught to solve this problem? If you have a particular thought in your mind, feel free to jump into the chat box, but just take a moment and think. So I can imagine my second grade classroom, and it would have probably gone something like this way back 20 plus years ago when I started teaching. All right, everybody, take out your ruler, grab your pencil. I want you to line the eraser up at the end of the ruler. Then I want you to read the number where the point is on the ruler. What's that number? Everybody yell 3. Fabulous, we've all learned to measure today. It's 3 inches. And so, yeah, Marianne, I'm seeing lots of things jump in here about, there would be a lot of traditional sort of procedures that would pop in here as to how we might teach this. So imagine that's the classroom. That's what they learned in second grade. Here's my question for you. What answer would students commonly select if that was their instruction? So let's try another poll. What do you think? How would students answer this question if that's what they were taught? Just gonna give you about 10 more seconds. I see some of you put it in the chat box as well. All right. So pretty overwhelmingly, 8 comes up. That, by the way, tracks with what we know from the actual assessment. So you can see here in third grade, 8 is the second most common answer. But the most common answer is definitely not 5 for our third graders. And even by 7th grade, there is still over half the students who are not answering that question correctly. And it's because of that pile, that clutter of stuff that in the way that we teach, that are not creating metacognitive, independent learners. It is going to be our natural inclination this year to teach those skills and those procedures because they're quick, they're easy, and there is a tendency to, because there's sort of this, we can see success, like they'll answer that question right on the test, but long term, that's going to hamper them. When we think about the students who wrote 8 or 3, they're looking for those moments of space of like, just read wherever answer, whatever the segment we're measuring is at the end, that's the number, I just have to read that number on the ruler. Or the students who write 6 who are saying, I go 3, 4, oops, sorry, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they're counting the tick marks instead of really getting at these bigger ideas around measurement. an accumulation of distance. I move from the 3 to the 4 and I've accumulated 1 inch. If I go from 4 to 5, I've accumulated 2 inches. This idea that 0 could be anywhere on our ruler. In fact, if you've ever actually done any work with a tape measure, you know that you never actually start on your 0 because the tape measure almost never has a good 0 on it. So you start somewhere else on your tape measure and that becomes your 0. Really understanding what those numerals on the ruler mean, which is your accumulation sort of that distance. If we were doing a much more in-depth way of teaching this, taking a few extra days to really think about how to do these in more in-depth ways, how might our independent learners who've really thought about measurement in a more in-depth way answer this question? I don't know about the rest of you, but when I was taught how to do protractors, you had to line that up on the 0 and you had to know whether you were opening to the left or opening to the right, because that was what was going to make the difference as to whether or not you read the top numbers or the bottom numbers. Does it make a difference whether you read the top numbers or the bottom numbers? If your rotation is from 70 to 120, or from 60 to 110, your answer is still the same. You can get into a great conversation about whether the rotation is clockwise or counterclockwise, and what a fabulous conversation to have with kids around angles. But it's not about a procedure here, but about using what you've learned around how measurement works. And this is just another application of measurement to push us forward. And for those of us who taught middle school, sure would be nice if they understood this idea of accumulation of distance when we got to dealing with integers and how it related to subtraction. And this is what we mean by trying to do not the tricks, not just all of the little steps and procedures that we want, not focusing on just the skills, but next year, more importantly than ever, we have to be thinking about how are we creating independent learners who can learn from their learning, who are metacognitive about what they're learning, so that they realize math is not just an accumulation of rules, but really this much more fundamental way of thinking about the world. And why is this critical? Why is this intention such an important part of our approach next year? I don't know how many of you go home exhausted after teaching for a day, but I sure do. We make more decisions than neurosurgeons, is what research is telling us. 1,500 decisions a day, 4 decisions a minute. And all of those decisions, those 11 million pieces of information that we take in, and probably more than that because we're teachers, are filtered through our perceptions, our interpretations, and a need for selective attention. But those perceptions and those interpretations are the things that also can create inequities. We have to be able to pause and take a moment and think about the assumptions that we make so that we can step back from those assumptions around our students. I was working with a group of teachers the other day, and they said, my students, and I asked them to fill out that same Padlet I asked all of you to fill out, and someone wrote, my students, I was so frustrated because they just didn't want to attend to the work that I was assigning them. They weren't motivated. And so we paused and we talked about, what do we mean by they weren't motivated? Because there's a lot behind that assumption. There's a lot that we are interpreting, that we perceived something that they didn't do the work, and we've made a quick interpretation about they weren't motivated, but without necessarily all the data about why students were not necessarily engaging and what was going on in that moment. I will tell you that for the first few weeks of COVID, every time my manager would check in with me, I said, I feel really apathetic right now. I feel very unmotivated. And we would try to dig in, like what was going on for me that was keeping me from being able to do the work that needed to be done, because there was a lot on all of us. And so we're gonna have to take those moments and step back and not necessarily do those quick interpretations that will not always give the full picture of our students. Because you will have to, even more than any other time, I think, through this process, Our judgment and our practices are going to be critical in this moment of acceleration. So we're going to have to be data analyzing and planning and targeting our instruction, but also thinking about relationship and the culture in our classroom and the feedback in order to make sure that we're really doing what students need from us. And so for these reasons, we're proposing 4 values to ground our decision making and put student learning at the forefront. Grade level content has to be the academic priority. From opportunity myth to what we learned after Katrina to any number of other studies that have come out, we have to start with grade level content as our academic priority. And we have to address the inequities head on. We have to recognize that not everyone's had an equal chance, and that we don't necessarily, that we have to think about how to make sure that we are providing those supports in order for kids to be able to do what they need. And then the last 2, which I haven't talked as much about, but I think are critical, which is we have to communicate more clearly, more often than we ever have before, because it's really scary right now for a lot of our parents. They know that they were home with the kids. They know they weren't getting as much learning as they were before. And so we're going to have to communicate really clearly about how we're addressing, how we're thinking about, how we want to make sure the kids are getting what they need this year. And to do that, it means we have to support all of our stakeholders, but also assume the best of all of our stakeholders. I'm going to pause there for a moment. In the chat box, share for me something that you think will be really comes out around one of these 4 values. What something that sort of comes to your brain around one of these 4 priorities that you're thinking on and mulling on right now in the chat box. Loving all these comments. Each time I do this talk, I steal from a group before, so I can't wait to take some of these ideas. Take a moment and read through what other people have written. So we've talked about, remember I didn't say I would necessarily give any particular answers, but I hope that I've pushed on why we need to accelerate learning, why we need to make sure that we are pushing towards grade level and being at grade level, and that some ideas of how we might be able to accelerate learning. We're going to take a moment, and I've given you a little bit of chance to type in the chat box, but I think that now that you sort of got some wheels turning a little bit, that it'll help to do some breakout rooms and get a chance to talk to each other. So we're going to break into rooms of about 4 to 5, and we're going to answer these 2 questions. Why is it critical to accelerate learning for students rather than remediate? And what about this makes sense? And what about this is hard or difficult? And I will put those 2 in the chat box as I think someone else is behind the scenes creating rooms for me.
I'm doing that, but the thing is, in the breakout rooms, they may not have an access to the chat box, the main chat box. So if they can
But
take,
and right now, you'll have access to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody should now, when you move to your breakout rooms, you'll see the 2 questions I just put in the chat box. So before we hit go on the breakout rooms, here is my, I've been doing breakout rooms a lot lately, so I learned that I have to give some directions on them. So you will have I want you to choose a facilitator, a recorder, and a reporter. The person whose name is closest to the beginning of the alphabet gets to be the facilitator. The person who is the recorder is the next name, and the reporter is the third closest. I shared with you the discussion questions again. You'll have, I actually think we can go 7 minutes. I talked fast, which is not uncommon for me. So you'll have about a 1-minute warning before we bring you back. And if you get cut off mid-sentence, my apologies. So you'll see the 1-minute warning and you can let it wind down. You don't have to come back until it actually brings you back into the main room. So we'll give you about 7 minutes. Be ready to come back. So the reporter should be ready to come back and share one thing in the chat box from your breakout room. All right.
okay, here we go.
Love the connection to our last talk around number talks. I agree. Yeah, it's still hard to plan. There's so much unknown. I so appreciate just everyone's openness and honesty about this is going to be hard. It's going to be against our natural grain of what we think to do. Loving all these ideas. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. I really just want to read the chat, but I will honor that the chat will be there, and I will keep reading. So as we come back, I said that I had 2 main goals. I spoke really fast, and so I actually can show you my extra 2 slides of my third goal, which was what can we do to prepare. So some things to think about. This is not necessarily anything different than what I've already said, but it sort of summarizes it maybe in a slightly different way. As you think over the next 2 years, as you work in your schools, in your classrooms, at your district level, it's really going to be important to think about what are those critical prerequisites. It's important to think about how to plan your approach for diagnosing. And someone asked about, so is that the pretest for like the chapter or the unit? And I would say, maybe. So if your pretest in your curriculum materials is essentially the same as your post-test, then probably not, because that's really just saying, hey, do you already know what's in this particular unit? But if your pretest is designed to figure out what pre-teach do my students need in order to access what's in the unit, then yes. And there are materials that are, some of them didn't do this, but are going to start doing this. So like, I heard behind the scenes that maybe Eureka and I am are doing some of this work. I've heard some things about Ready. Like, there are definitely curriculum materials out there that are thinking ahead on this idea that we need to be approaching our pre-assessments around what are the critical conceptual understandings that kids need, that if I gave a mini lesson here or there, targeted teach, then kids would have better access to that grade level material. And then really thinking about how do we monitor that progress so that we and hold ourselves and each other accountable for staying with those grade assignments so that we can adjust the supports as necessary. And then just sort of, I think what some of you have put out and what I was reading in the chat, which is we do need to keep thinking about our students and our families and how to engage them. There are so many ways we can learn about what's going on with our students and our families. One of the things that I want you to continue to think about when you think about do they have their basic needs, or what's happening with resources around that student learning, is who are you hearing from and who's missing? So as you think about who you were able to connect with last year and who might have been missing. So I was listening to a superintendent of San Antonio schools this morning, and he talked about tracking down all but 95% of his students. Now that seems like a lot, right? But there was this moment where he's like, that means 1,500 students were unaccounted for during the remote learning process. And he said, what was critical for us was to analyze who were those 1,500 students so that we could figure out better strategies for making sure that we connected with them. So it's all about making sure that we know this information, but also who do we not know this information from so that we can do a better job of connecting with them. And then some additional resources. So I'm going to put into the chat box the links that I have here so that you have all of them. So the first link I'm putting in is to the TNTP acceleration guide. Don't know why that didn't show up as a hot link. The second one I'm going to put in is a link to student achievement partners. I have some insider information. They did a ton of work thinking through what needs to happen for next year in terms of thinking about what needs to be emphasized, what can be combined, what can be integrated, what do you have to pull from last year, what do you not need to necessarily spend as much time on. That document should be coming out within, my fingers are crossed. I heard that they finalized it last week, so that should mean this week. So pay attention, and if I hear more, I will make sure we send that out through our email through CCTM. So those of you who are CCTM members, not that I'm encouraging membership or anything, we're about to do a commercial on that. As your new president-elect of CCTM, please become a member, because then you will get insider information on how to get that. I also put into the chat box recently NCTM and NCSM together put out a great document to be thinking about next year that I think is worth a read. And then this last one is how to sign up for a group IO, and then just look for the co-math leaders group if you want to be involved in some of the work that Colorado educators are doing in our NCSM affiliate, Colorado Math Leaders. Definitely sign up. If you want more information, privately chat Raymond. He is not the current president, but I know that he knows how to, I rely on him because Raymond Johnson always knows everything about how you need to. I think there's actually on the line our current leaders of that group as well, but as an additional thing too, that you could join and access and be part of this amazing group of educators across the country and the world who are helping each other out to do this better. I just really, like I said, so appreciate how educators have pulled together, and really, you are all the heroes. Thank you, Kim. I knew someone out there would remember, who I think is on the line. So Megan, thank you. She's being quiet out there. And then I want to end with just sort of a reminder, because I really loved the statement that Robert Berry and Trina put out, our current past and our current president of NCTM. I know that they wrote this some time ago, but it was in their most recent president's statement that just really resonated with me, which is, I talked about how our brains are going to have to like rethink so that we don't make the inequities larger. And so this just sort of is I have this hanging above my desk as my reminder that math, that we support the use of math as an analytic tool to challenge power and privilege and oppression, and that we encourage all educators to challenge the systems of oppression that privilege some while disadvantaging others, and that we encourage all educators to create socially and emotionally safe spaces for themselves, their students, and their colleagues. And I think if we can keep that in mind as we go through our year, and actually even just sharing that with our kids in kid language for our youngest ones, but that this is what math can do, and that there is such power in what we do for a living, that that will be such a wonderful way to go about the work that we do together. So that's more information about how to get hold of me if you need it. I will put my email in the chat box in case you want to email me about something. Happy to connect on that. I know I'm going to do questions in a little bit here. But as we close out, just pick one of these and think about as you head into your summer, and hopefully we'll have the much needed break that you are all have earned plus this year. What's one thing that sort of came up for you either in this session or even one of the other sessions that CCTM has been doing, that's a commitment you could make, or a next step in your learning, or an action, or some results you're hoping for? Just jot that down to yourself. No need to put it in the chat, just for your own personal. And I will stop sharing, and I think hand it back over to my CCTM colleagues.
Thank you, Mary. I think access to the presentation and recording will be in the CCTM website, and CCTM members will have access to it after some editing. All right. I think the next thing that we have is message from the CCTM board. I will start playing that.
Hey, Colorado math teachers. I'm Joni Funderburk. I am the president of the Colorado Council of Teachers of Mathematics, and that means I am responsible for maintaining the mission and vision and direction of the organization as we work to serve all of you, the Colorado math teachers. I currently live in Parker, Colorado, and I work for Texas Instruments. I am the Strategic Alliance and State Policy Director. And a fun fact about me, this month, June of 2020, my husband and I celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary.
Hi, my name is Mary Pittman, and I am the president-elect for CCTM as of this year. I was the Region 4 rep, and I'm responsible for learning the role of the president over the next year. I'm from Iowa originally, but I've been in Colorado for 20 years, just north of Denver, and I'm currently a project director for TNTP, the New Teacher Project. A fun fact about me is that I've been to 5 of the 7 continents in the world.
Greetings, Colorado math educators. My name is Kim Smith, and I currently serve as the Vice President of CCTM, which means that I work with our President and our President-elect to plan, facilitate, and guide the work of the board and the organization. I'm from Grand Junction, Colorado, and I currently work as a secondary math content specialist in Mesa County School District number 51. Fun fact about me, I love to listen to live music, especially when it comes to bluegrass festivals.
Hello, Colorado. My name is Joseph Bowles, and I am the treasurer for CCTM. That means that I'm responsible for the monitoring of our finances and to make sure we have funds for all of our wonderful activities. I currently work at George Washington High School in Denver, where I serve as both a teacher and a department chair / instructional leader for our school. Fun fact about me is that next year will be my 20th year in the field of education.
Hello, my name is Lori Hillman. I currently serve as the membership chair for CCTM, which means my job just got much simpler with the new membership platform. I am from Windsor, Colorado, and I currently work as a math teacher at the high school. A fun fact is, from my front porch, I can see the front of the high school.
Hello, Colorado. My name is Linda Donaldson, and I am your CCTM secretary, which means I'm in charge of taking the minutes for the meetings. I currently live in Monte Vista, Colorado, and I teach middle school math in Center, Colorado. My fun fact is I love going to the mountains and spending time with my children.
Hello, Colorado. My name is Megan Korpanik, and I am the NCTM representative for CCTM, which means that it's my job to be the bridge between the two organizations. My job is to represent Colorado with the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, as well as to bring information back to all of you. I currently live in Wellington, Colorado, which is near the Wyoming border, and I am the high school math specialist for Denver Public Schools. Fun fact about me is that I love learning and growing, especially in different sports.
Hello, my name is Jim Butterfield. I'm coming to you virtually from my wife's first grade classroom, which we built during the COVID crisis here in our home in Fruita, Colorado. I currently serve as the administrative liaison to the Colorado Council of Teachers of Mathematics. I am the principal at Book Cliff Middle School up here in Grand Junction. A fun fact about me is that I am 3 peaks away from hiking all of the 14ers in Colorado. You have a great day. Let us know how we can serve you. Thank you.
Hey there, Colorado math teachers. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you all here. I am Chelsea Karstensen, and I am your Region 1 representative on the CCTM board. I serve most of the central Denver metro school districts. I teach math in Littleton Public Schools, and like most Coloradans, I love being outside and hiking and snowshoeing.
Hi, Colorado. My name is Suzanne Sumby, and I'm from Westminster. I currently serve as the Region 2 rep, which means I'm responsible for Gilpin County, Clear Creek County, Boulder County, and Jefferson County. And I currently work as a pathway designer with a focus on math. Fun fact, I grew up on a farm in Kansas.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Peter Zola, and I'm the Region 3 director, which includes parts of Adams and Arapahoe counties, including Aurora and Cherry Creek. I'm currently a 5th grade teacher and math coach teaching in Aurora Public Schools, and a fun fact about me is that I have a collection of over 200 fantasy and science fiction novels.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Pitts, and I currently serve as the CCTM Region 4 representative. That means that I support, celebrate, and communicate with math teachers in northeastern Colorado. I'm from Fort Collins, Colorado. I currently work as a math teacher at Poudre High School, where I've been for 22 years, and I'm also the math department leader there. Fun fact is I live in the house I grew up in, and I teach in the high school that I went to. I look forward to meeting you and working with you. Thanks.
Hello, y'all. Felicia Casto here, current Region 6 representative. Will I help communicate and connect those members on the western side of the state of Colorado? I am currently a rancher's wife in the summertime, where I help my husband on our ranch, and during the school year I am a learning design specialist in District 51 for elementary mathematics. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Colorado. My name is Heather. My title is Dr. Heather Johnson. On the CCTM board, I currently serve as the editor of the Colorado Math Teacher Journal, which means that I'm responsible for overseeing all of the content and communication for the journal. I'm from Pennsylvania, and 10 years ago, I moved to lovely Colorado for the opportunity to start a position on faculty at the University of Colorado, Denver. A fun fact, this spring, I have taken a picture of plants growing in our backyard garden every day, and it's been fun to see what's popping up.
Hello, Colorado. My name is Gülden Karakök. I currently serve as the liaison between the Rocky Mountains section of the Mathematical Association of America and the CCTM, which means that I'm responsible for communication of activities of these two organizations. I live in Greeley, Colorado, which is in Region 4 of the CCTM. And I currently work at the University of Northern Colorado in the mathematics department, and I teach various mathematics and math education courses for undergraduate and graduate students. One fun fact about me, I like to travel a lot. I like to learn about different cultures, and I have been to every continent except for Antarctica. I'm looking forward to working with you all.
Okay, thank you everyone. That was a little way for us to introduce ourselves as board members. And now we're going to have some time to ask Mary some questions, or even if you have any reflections on what Mary has presented to us. So some of you have started to type into the chat. If you could write your questions, type your questions into the chat box for us, and Mary will answer your questions. Or if you have any responses or reflections, please share those with us right now.
Mary will do your best to answer your questions. And if I don't have an idea, hopefully we can crowdsource. I'm all about crowdsourcing. And some of you had questions about accessing the slideshow and the video, as we are recording this virtual event, and CCTM members will have access to this information on the CCTM website. And we do have some giveaways later. Okay. I would suggest us start a conversation with our colleagues about acceleration. I actually do recommend the acceleration guide from TNTP. There's some great discussion questions in there and some ways of framing it. I think it is helpful to sort of have that research around the opportunity myth and what we know about accessing grade level assignments. It was surprising actually to all of us within TNTP just how much that made a difference. And so I think even just starting with reading the opportunity myth together and looking at the acceleration guide and framing it from research, most of us who spend time in math appreciate the research. And Karen, if I had even begun to alleviate all of your fears, I would have been so surprised. But I'm glad that at least a couple. Let's go ahead and we could all stick on the line for a little longer, but if we want to jump to our other announcements as people are putting up questions. I was going to go through and see if there were any other previous questions that we had in the chat. So CCTM wants to make you aware of some upcoming opportunities. And if you have been on any of our other previous virtual calls from May and early June, then you've seen some of these, but we do have some new opportunities that we're going to share with you tonight. Our next virtual event will be July 20th with Jeff Krull. And if you haven't already, please make sure that you're checking out NCTM's 100 Days of Professional Learning. And the NCTM conference has been postponed until April of 2021. So there's still some professional learning opportunities through NCTM, but the conference has been postponed. I believe it was going to be in Chicago. And then, as you heard Heather Johnson introduce herself in our video, the CMT Journal is open access. And if you are interested, we're always looking for new writers and always looking for readers for our CMT Journal. And a new opportunity that we have opened up in CCTM is we are looking for a technology specialist. Similar to our any other CCTM members, this is a volunteer position, but we would love to have a technology specialist, someone that could help us with our social media and website and other electronic ways of communicating with our members and with other math teachers. And our book study, Taking Action, is going to start this fall. It'll start in September of 2020, and it will run through June of 2021. And we have one more opportunity we'd like to share with you. Hold on, if you could change the next slide, thank you.
back on. Thank you. Robert Berry, former NCTM president, he will be our virtual keynote speaker at the beginning of August. We haven't established a date just yet, but we will be having some form of workshop for our CCTM teachers and members. And that will be also the same time we're kicking off the Taking Action series, which will have a book study. So that's exciting. And now we're going to do some giveaways. So Raymond, are you ready? We want to do 4 giveaways. And Raymond and Lori have been taking attendance, and they're going to randomly choose 4 participants or 4 people who have been with us this evening.
Mary, I think there are 3 questions on the chat box. While we are waiting for that, I wonder if you want to address those.
Perfect. So I privately chatted Jim and Beth and said, you had to put me on the spot because I wish that I had the perfect answer for remote learning. I actually think we should crowdsource this one. So all of the great ideas that all of you have been doing, I mean, I will say I was blown away during the last conversation, our last virtual. If you didn't get a chance to see the last one on Number Talks, just the way that you can use Desmos from an online learning perspective blew me away. But then I know that online is not always what we mean when we say remote. And so I think the more we can crowdsource that, the better. There was a question here around my favorite source for low floor, high ceiling problems. I think I might have to say that I have too many that I love. So like, I will admit that I kind of went down the rabbit hole when I was looking at some of the ones from Robert Kaplinski and some of the 3-act math tasks. But I also just sort of sometimes really love the ones off of Illustrative Math, because for me, what I'm looking for when I think about a low floor, high ceiling task is what mathematics can I make sure we learn from that low floor, high ceiling task. I had a great debate one time with Kathy Seeley about, it's not just about having a good task, but having a string of good tasks that really help me build the mathematics that I'm learning. Certainly some of my favorite ones are the Shell Center materials that came out of the UK. Sonia, wow, I know, small schools, 5 math plans. So I would highly recommend connecting with CML. I also recommend looking at what Student Achievement Partners will put out, like sign up for their blog. They are putting out some good stuff around that. And then just because I happen to know that they're doing this work and it's a free set of materials, check out Illustrative Math, because if I'm remembering right, Sonia, you're high school. If I'm wrong about that, I think Student Achievement Partners will be your favorite thing. But if you're middle school or high school, the Illustrative Math work that they're doing right now is pretty intense and pretty valuable. Even if it's not your curriculum, I would highly recommend. They've thought really strategically and are coming out with resources sort of like in the minute. They're working fast and furious behind the scenes, and some of those resources I think you can grab and use. All right, and I know I talked over all of our winners. Do we want to announce them since we've written them in the chat?
Yes. So Tom, Suzanne, Nancy, and Catherine, I won't pronounce your last names right now, but if you haven't already, will you please private message Felicia Casto, and she will get your addresses so we can send you some swag. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for sticking around. So if you are interested we have a certificate here that we will put a link, I believe we're putting a link in the chat, where you can print this off and use this for 1.5 credit hours. But if you are a CCTM member and we're taking attendance, then CCTM website is essentially keeping track of your time with us on these virtual events, and you can print out a transcript from cctmath.org. So what you would do is log on to cctmath.org, and you would click on the continuing education in the member area, and then you can search for the PDF for your transcript. You can print that off and provide that for your district for hours. And the link is in the chat box right now. Thank you, Guldan, for the certificate. And if you're not a member already, there are many advantages to being a CCTM member. One of those being that you could access Mary's slideshow today, and even this recording, and all of our previous recordings. And again, Felicia, did you get in touch with our 4 winners?
I did. Thank you so much. I've got all 4 addresses, so we're good to go.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining us again, if this is not your first time, and thank you if this is your first time this summer. We will hopefully see all of you again, and invite other teachers. Remember that these are free events, so if you have other math teachers that would be interested, Jeff Krall will be presenting on July 20th, and it'll be the same time, 3:30 to 5. Is that right, Felicia? Am I right? Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to CCTM for providing such quality professional learning and development over the summer to all of our math teachers, not just members. And thank you, Mary. This was very helpful. I've written down so much information to share with my department as we begin thinking about next year. Even though there are a lot of unknowns, we can definitely start thinking. So thank you so much for all those resources and information. And it's a good reminder.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.